State of the art, beating OpenAI. No, but it's silent.
But take us back a little bit. Like, so we are talking about this one way. I think one of the bigger sort of in quotation mark launches of a KB model. So, but because this was newsworthy, I mean, like, so what's back up the tape? Like, what was the thinking, or why did you want to have a launch, and how did it all go?
Yeah, so the team, Lenora was one core part of that team, and that was led by Lenora Westerbacka Olsson. They had trained a whisper model, which is a sound model, a speech-to-text model. And we saw early on that the results of this model were fantastic. So we could clearly beat the OpenAI AI model in several different measures and etc. So we thought this is clearly newsworthy because we're going to share this model as a research result. So it's open for everyone to use. And it's going to prove useful in like so many use cases. We already see it happening right now. So we wanted to sort of make a little bit of a splash. We don't normally do that, but I think the time was right to do it. You can't do it for
so many were waiting for this.
Yeah.
So it's perfect time to do it.
Yeah. So how did you do the splash? Did you invite people then to come there, or how did you arrange the actual launch?
Yeah, again, I think especially also around the event, it was very much Leonora's doing. So she set up, there's a tool from the communication department to set up an invitation list, and then there was some press release, and then it was the word of mouth. And LinkedIn and
etc. You had a formal press release as well beforehand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I saw the press release, and I was on the short list.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And there's some really nice photo of the team, I think, on the blog, including Jostina. I'm not in there.
Sorry.
No. Yeah.
Awesome. And then it came. How many people attended the launch?
It was a full house, which at the big auditorium, or whatever you want to call it, the KB is a little bit more than 100 persons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Plus some on Zoom.
Yeah, on Zoom as well. I don't know how many that was.
And you had what was it? The head librarian? Is that the proper term, or?
Yeah, the national librarian. She's sort of
that's the CEO of Kungliga Biblioteket.
Yeah, Riksbibliotekarie. I think that's about the coolest title you can have.
Yeah,
actually.
I think so.
It's a super cool title.
Yeah.
Actually.
So she and me did the sort of the big cutting the ribbon thing. Yeah, and then
you actually had a ribbon, or
no?
Just
setting the scene.
Yeah, all these mistakes. I wasn't in the photo. We didn't have a ribbon.
The sound didn't work.
But now we're here.
Now we're here. That's a good thing. And then there were 3 kind of rather technical presentations. Lenora did one about the sort of the background and the computation, about also the computational resources used in EuroHPC. We're going to talk more about that later. And then Fatton Rekatati did a long, really good presentation about the data wrangling around this, which is super complicated, and also talking about the importance of data sovereignty and etc., and the importance of the Swedish domain of data. And then Jostina took also a kind of complicated presentation, but with a few good sort of the selling points, showing how much better this model is than the previous models.
Oh. And we are getting into all these kind of details, and it's super cool that we have this awesome, I think, AI lab in KB.
Yeah,
you're producing one model after the other that I think is so useful for the Swedish and other societies that we have and companies.
Yeah, but I must like the cliffhanger that we're going to talk about, beating OpenAI's model in what we can achieve, but more importantly with the smaller, more manageable model.
Yeah,
that is super cool from a small team of 12 people in KB Labs.
Yeah,
that is rock and roll, rock star stuff. So cool to talk about.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. But before we dig deep into these kind of details, how that was achieved and what you can use it for, let's first welcome here Love Börjeson, an old friend that's been here before and is an awesome person that I think one of the more knowledgeable people about how to really train large models and have done so with success so many times. But perhaps, Louis, if you could, just who are you? How did you get into the role that you have as head of R&D at KBLab?
Yeah, so I'm a former mariner who flew to the shore when I was 30, and then did the PhD, and ended up at Stanford University, the Computational Social Science Lab. So I'm not a data scientist by training. I'm a sociologist of some kind, from there, I moved back to Sweden, started a few labs in industry, and then was hired at the National Library of Sweden, the Kungliga Biblioteket, to start a data lab.
What year was that, approximately?
2019.
19.
Approximately.
I only know two people who present themselves as a computational sociologist.
Right.
That's you and Mikael Klingvall.
Yeah.
Where did you guys meet?
Yeah, so weird, but in a small marketing analyst sort of company. I was consulting there.
You were consulting with Pro Sales.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And then so he was the lead. He works with me in Pro Sales now, and he updated his title. Now he's senior mad scientist.
Yeah.
And then in Pro Sales he had used mad scientist.
Okay,
so
cool.
he was like but to use the word computational sociologist, I find that only you do.
But it was interesting because they were sort of, they didn't understand him, I think, at Pro Sales. And we started to talk and we understood each other immediately. So it was sort of, okay, so you're a nerd. But yeah. So anyhow, I started up the lab in 2019 and it's been growing since, yeah.
And a bit about the lab today. How many people are you? What do you do in a short?
So the lab itself has sort of expanded a little bit, and now the lab itself is bigger, but now the lab is also part of a unit that is the R&D unit at the National Library. So I'm head of that unit. So we have all kinds of weird research going on. People who are experts in Latin and medieval Swedish.
But this is a fundamental reorg that happened like a year ago, or like we consolidated.
When was this, Jostina?
A couple of months ago, I think.
Yeah, a couple of months ago.
So 2024, you had a consolidation of business units into the R&D.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think they will recognize themselves as being part of a business unit. Anyhow, but the lab itself. When we started the lab, what KB had, KB is the National Library, so KB for short. What they have realized was that we have these mad scientists now who want to have data sets, whatever is that. So we have the collections that are optimized for storing, and then they want to have something they call data. We don't know what that is. So we need something in between, probably data science. They didn't really know that, but so they hired me to do that. So me and Martin Malmsten, who was sort of one of the founding fathers, original gangsters of the lab, together with Emma Rende, we did that to produce data sets. And as we were talking about, the first data set took us a year. Now we do it in a matter of hours. But so that was the first thing: create data sets for scientists from the collection.
And perhaps people don't know about KB actually having so much data because of the Swedish pliktlag.
Deposit law, yeah. And the date, of course. Everyone knows it's 1661 when that law came into existence. Yeah, and it was the law for censorship, of course, back then. And now it's a tool for democracy. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty much the same, but it has warped.
But on a global scale, what do you know more about? How does it work that we have this law that actually we have then collected everything? And then when we say everything, I think it's hard for people to understand that when you have a poster for a rave party in the 90s, it actually, at the printer, when they're supposed to do 1,000 prints, they do 1,002 prints because they sent 2 of the posters to KB. Seems forever.
Yeah.
But how many on the worldwide scale? Who has that fundamental hoarding going on?
Hoarding law.
Who has a hoarding law more than us?
I think in terms of deposit law, that's an interesting question. I think our law is one of the first because the Swedish unit state was one of the earliest in its form. Protestant unit state. And it was sort of something taking form that was separate from the royal family. And Oxenstierna inte Oxelstierna, or is it the other way around? I keep forgetting. He was forming that state, and this was one of the part of that, the deposit law.
And what is it
1661?
1661.
Yeah, that's the law.
That's the law.
The origin of the library itself is the collections of the royal family Vasa, who is Renaissance people. They wanted to have a library naturally, so then it was truly a royal library. So the first catalog is from the 16th century, so like 100 years earlier. But it came into existence as a library during the 17th century, so 16 something, with the deposit law. And then we had the big disaster, 1697, 98, with the big fire of the royal castle. And then it has been more of a national library, actually keeping the name, sort of witnessing of the origin of the library. So it's still called Kungliga biblioteket in Swedish, but it is, for all intents and purposes, a national library. Yeah.
But it's old in this sense, but it's also in this crazy breadth.
Yeah.
The breadth of what you have collected. That is also
absolutely, because we have everything printed. So what people are thinking about is obviously books. Yeah. So we have books, yes, but we also have what we call ephemera, which is the everyday collections, which are pamphlets and posters and what have you, menus and
rave posters,
the rave collections. And we all have radio and TV broadcasts. We have TV. We have computer games. We have.
It is mad. It's when you think about when you start thinking about the petabytes, or it doesn't matter. It's more.
Do you have a number for petabytes?
Is it more than peta?
So someone's probably gonna say that I'm wrong about this, but the latest figure I heard when I started was 26.
26 petabytes.
Nice. Cool stuff.
Cool stuff. Anyhow, so the first thing we did was to compile data sets. I'm going to stop talking soon, but the thing we did, 2019, this was after the launch of the first transformer model from Google that came out 2018 in the winter. And me and Martin started to test this multilingual model, and we saw that it blew everything that existed in this for the Swedish language out of the water. So all these dependency models, they were sort of obsolete overnight, but we also realized, wait a minute, we can beat them. We can be the world's best lab for the Swedish language.
So KB-BERT
came into existence a couple of months later because we didn't have any computational resources. So it took a while to train that one. Released it, I think it was January, perhaps February 2020. And it has been downloaded like a million times since.
Yeah.
So and then you grew into several different, Word2Vec, blah blah blah, many different variations for different science purposes.
Yeah.
Awesome, and very welcome here as well, Jostina. I hope you pronounce your name. Data scientist at KBLab, right? Please describe a bit. Who are you, and how did you come to work at KBLab?
Yeah, I think in comparison, I'm just. A standard language nerd. I started studying languages back in Poland, so it was Swedish, Dutch, German. It was before all transformer models, all Whisper, Chat, GPT, everything. So my knowledge about natural language processing was quite limited. But then I started working as translation project manager, and I saw how this field is transformed by all these new technologies. And I thought, that's really cool. So I found this program, language technology, here in Sweden. I moved, digged into that, and then I found my job at KB. So that was my story.
And what year was that, approximately?
Around 4 years ago. Yeah.
Nice.
But I heard something. There was a project or consortium, that you were
exactly.
on.
Very cool project that I'm a part of.
You're still part of that.
Yeah.
That's actually how the funding is part of how this works. How you've ended up.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
Yeah, I was employed as part of this project. So it's called HumInfra.
HumInfra.
Like humanistic
infrastructure for humanities. Yeah.
Human intra.
HumInfra.
Yeah.
Infra.
Exactly.
Infra. Infrastructure.
Exactly.
I'm a bit slow today.
Cool. And you have now been working also with the Whisper, the main, topic of attraction today, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I was part of the team that developed our Swedish suite of Whisper models.
Yeah.
And perhaps if we move quickly into the theme, perhaps you can start by explaining how did the origin of KB Whisper came about? Why did you start working with it?
So everything that relates specifically to the model, Justina is going to have to be answer those questions. But the background was that we had a wave-to-vec model, which is the sort of the architecture for sound models that predates. Yeah, sorry.
Some people may not know what Whisper is, so we could perhaps give a short background. What can you do with Whisper, and then a bit of background, for word-to-vec and whatnot, or
so about Whisper, what can you do with that?
Yeah, sure. It's called ASR model, so it's automatic speech recognition model, which you can use for transcribing any audio that you have, and then getting transcription through that.
Yeah. And Whisper started came from OpenAI to start with, but now you're building your own, basically, right?
Exactly. We're doing something called continued pre-training. So we're building upon the OpenAI models.
So you started from the weights they have released and then continued training from that. Okay, good.
Yeah. So Whisperer was the original word, Whisperer. That was the name of the open AI model.
So, Sartre, the French philosopher, he said that intellectuals need to be parasites.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what we are.
No, standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, that's another way to sort of express that. But so, we take architectures and preferably also the weights of the architectures, and we do stuff with that.
Actually, I used that analogy for one of the opening speeches at Data Innovation Summit. Yeah. We talked about adaptability or learning. There's the way to go faster now is to learn and adapt from what is out there.
Yeah, Sweden is a small country. It's a low resource language, and the lab is very, very small. So we need to have these strategies.
Okay, so you started to train the Whisper model from KB. And can you just start or explain a bit more? How did you get started? What was the first things? How did you get started planning how to embark on this project?
There's a fundamental difference between the wave-to-vec model and the Whisper model. Is that the wave-to-vec model is primarily trained on data that is not annotated. They only train on sound, no text.
And wave-to-vec, just to explain it a bit more, that was not a transformer-based kind of model, right? And can you just explain what is wave-to-vec?
Well, it was it's sort of a more basic sound model that you could fine-tune to do the same stuff that we do with Whisper, but Whisper do it better. So you can have but it's trained in a very similar way as the big text models. You take away a little bit of sound and you have the model to guess what that is. And, if it's correct, then you will strengthen the network, and otherwise you won't. So we had a good wave-to-vec model, but we also realized that we want a Whisper model. That's the problem for KB. What do we have? We have unannotated data. That's our strength. And Whisper takes annotated data. So that was the first problem that the team had to solve. So there was a lot of cooperation involved that Leonora was mainly responsible for.
We used some of our collections, but it turned out that, in the beginning you think, okay, I have so much data. And then there is looking for what's in Swedish, what have Swedish subtitles, and then the duplication, because you probably don't want to train on 50 Donald Duck recordings, right? You want to take it out. So we looked for some collaborations, and we found some great people who helped us with this process.
But you say you have unannotated data, and for people that may not know, but of course you need to have the output somehow to train a model. You need to know what the text should be for the voice and audio that you put into it. But don't you have a lot of text associated with each SVT production or whatnot? Is it just the timestamps that you don't have, or what is not really annotated?
It depends. It depends on what kind of format of the data we get. So sometimes it's just built-in subtitles in the TV. So we can't really use that. We would need to do some OCR processes to get it from the...
Okay, so you don't have it in structured format or in
exactly.
text
So
format.
we used everything that we could, but then back in time it's...
So subtitles, for me, you have text on this. No, you don't, because you have it in the image. So then you need to have an OCR technique to get that out. So it's complications on complications here.
Yeah, and another complication, correct me if I'm wrong, Jostina, but is that the subtitles, they're not per word. You know, this is a translation to something else, which is suitable for training a Whisper, because that was one of the strengths of the Whisper architecture, that you can actually use annotation, so you know, text that weren't matched perfectly with the sound and still works. That's the magic of it. The problem is you want to have an ASR function that also works for other kinds of transcriptions, more
Verbatim.
Yeah, thank you.
Verbatim meaning on the fly, or what does that mean?
No, when you have subtitles, you usually have some short forms. You don't
Summarized.
exactly.
Summarized.
Yeah, the screen is the space is limited, so you can put everything.
And Whisper is less sensitive to that compared to Way2Vec. Is that the way to phrase
Absolutely, but we also want it to know how to do
verbatim?
Yeah,
Say the word now. I can't do it.
verbatim.
Yeah, thank you. I won't say it. So yeah, we want it to be able to do.
Verbatim.
Thank you. And then we need to have that kind of data as well, and we didn't have it.
But when you said you had, in the launch, a quite technical, 3 technical presentations, where one was on the whole data wrangling.
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about now, or is that something else?
Yeah, it concerns that. Yeah, but the big sort of matching process that Fatma Rekatati did was we had the transcripts of the parliamentary speeches. We had the sound files, but they were unmarked, and he had to match them somehow.
But because if we could figure that out, then you had a fairly good set of transcript and sound.
And that's what we have, thanks to Fatma.
And so this became one of the key pieces of the strategy, how to do ASR. So actually, it's the Riksdags, what do we call it?
The parliament.
The parliament
addresses.
So the parliament addresses is one of the core strategies in this training approach.
Yeah, and I mean, it was just to get that data was, it's like a spy thriller almost. I mean, they ended up delivering a actual hard drive with data.
Oh, you can't have an USB on this or whatever.
I don't know. It's completely open. So, but for various reasons. So that was one thing. The other thing was to sort of the data wrangling was super important. Just to rig the collaborations was another thing, because previously we had been sort of not doing stuff in a bubble, but depending on our own data. Now we depended on external data, which is an unfamiliar situation for us.
Okay, so how you organize the collaboration, the project management, the coordination piece.
Yeah, and it is a lot of sort of inter-organizational politics going into that, which Leonora handled, and Faton and Justina and Agnes, also part of the team.
It's always more than you think.
So what were the main challenges? One, of course, was the data wrangling part, I guess, in getting this started. Were there any other major challenges that you had to tackle before setting off the training, etc.?
I would still say something about the data, because it was really months of first obtaining the data.
When did you actually start the whole project of KB Whisper?
It was like a year and a half ago, I think. First, we get this development access to see if we can do it and how the computers work, like the HPC environments, and just getting ready for the real.
We're getting more into the HPC part very soon. Cool. 1.5 years ago. That's
so if you summarize sort of the key steps around organizing the data, how would you summarize that in sort of the key process steps? Not technically, but sort of first we needed to get the access or blah blah blah. Then we needed to figure out the model. How would you summarize that?
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to say, because we had so many different data sources that it was iterative process. Because in the beginning we thought, okay, we're working with our data, so we prepared the pipeline for our data, but then we got different sources which had different problems that we needed to solve. So, for example, if you're working with subtitles, you need to clean it in a specific way. You don't want to train on data that has some comments inside, like someone is singing or the door shuts or something like that. But then we were working also with this dialectal data from ISOF, which is Institute for Language and Folklore.
Yeah.
I believe, in English, yes. And it was also a different type of data, something that I couldn't really understand as a non-native speaker. So we were listening to these recordings, and they were really, really hard for me. And I saw my Swedish colleagues also.
So dialectal, it's like hardcore gotländska, or what could it be?
Ja, jag vet. Det är en otrolig skillnad på olika svenska.
Roligt att komma från Borås.
Ja. I think Listerlandet is one of the really, the western part of Blekinge. That's really hard.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of data challenges to just get started and figure this out. Perhaps at some point you still need to think more about, I guess, the code to train or the way of the architecture. You're going to use the same one. You're going to change it somehow. Or what about like the way of training it? Could you just reuse the code that you had, or how did that get started?
Mm-hmm. So we used the code that was out there on the internet. So we found some great guidelines from Hugging Face, and we thought, okay, we will base it on this. Yeah. But then, of course, our data was completely different, and we were handling not gigabytes, but terabytes of data. So the methods that they were describing didn't really work for us because it was, okay, everything crashes. What now?
So you had to really do method development here.
Exactly. We needed to rethink everything. So that's why it was iterative process, because, okay, first when we were just testing out everything, the scale was smaller. But then when we got the real data, then the problems occurred.
Can you get a bit technical about the tech stack potentially you were using? What libraries or what frameworks, what code or something that you can share?
Yeah, so we were using this Hugging Face notebook first. Yeah. And then, let me think for a second, because we used so much different frameworks, and we were,
Were you using like Hugging Face, like pipelines and stuff, or was it?
No, I think when I say that, it was Hugging Face first, but were we using? Oh my God! How can I not know if it was a Hugging Face implementation or PyTorch? Sorry for that, everyone. Oh my God!
So there's pieces from Hugging Face, and then some. What are some of the example of pieces from PyTorch libraries you tried out? What was that?
Yeah, so we used it for like feature extraction, of course, because we needed to first, because we had so much data, we couldn't do it on the fly. So we split it. So this was also a big modification from what they had in the beginning. They could also only just run everything at once, but we needed to split it. So first we did this data preparation, feature extraction, preparing texts, and then just running the data, Hugging Face data sets, loading everything into memory. And then when we had everything in place, we could train.
But this is all work you're still doing on your own HGX machines at home before you go to the big HPC, or what is done at home now, and what this is pre going down to Leonardo, right?
Yeah, partially it really depends on the project, because if we have this development access, then we can test everything out there.
Okay.
And prepare everything there. But of course, we can also do it on our computers and prepare Docker containers.
But in the KB Whisper particular case, did you have like a developer access, and did you muck around on Leonardo, or were you doing some pieces at home?
It was both.
Both, yeah.
Some data wrangling with it at home.
Yeah.
Okay, so then at some point you got the code working, you had some data set that you can start to potentially start training on. Can you share anything about, while training, how did you monitor it? Did you have to restart at some point? Did you get some crashes, or what happened when you start to train it?
Yeah, of course, a lot of crashes, of course. Some scheduled, some unscheduled downtime, some nodes that were not working and we needed to exclude them. But we knew it wasn't the first access to HPC computers that we had. So
this is
this is usual,
this
right?
This is life, yeah.
If you talk with someone who worked in this environment, you know that these things happen. So we were prepared. So we knew, okay, many checkpoints, so we can restart it at any time. If anything happens, we're just
When did the actual training start approximately? Was it like summer last year, or what time could it have been?
Around that time, yeah. Because we had many sizes of the models. So some from the tiny...
you started with a smaller one. Okay.
Yeah, so from the smallest to the largest, we tried it, and it took some time.
I remember this. I think we were at the AI after work, also, and you were sort of anticipating, like a kid in a candy store. Ooh, we go for Leonardo now. Soon it's happening. Yeah. You remember that?
Yeah, I think Leonora spilled the sort of. She was like that, telling me the early results. So it looks really good. The tiny one will beat the medium one from OpenAI, etc. So,
anything surprising during the training? Besides, you were expecting the crashes to happen. You had a lot of checkpoints to be sure that you can restart, not from scratch, but at the latest checkpoint in some way. Anything that was surprising, perhaps during the training?
How smoothly some of the trainings went, actually.
Ooh, really? That's positive.
Yeah, but I think it was because we put so much work into data that then it was much less work to get the code working.
Did you tune in the hybrid parameters like learning rate or something, or batch sizes or anything else?
We did. Some models, they didn't want to cooperate with us, so we actually needed to change. But we based it on the papers, so first we had something to start off with, but of course there were some tweaks that we needed to implement.
Well, I mean, maybe this is not the right time, but I take a shot at it. Before we started today, we talked about how the whole workflow has evolved over the years and how efficient you have come, and a little bit like you said, we need to talk about. We can talk about the crappy workflow, or we can talk about the workflow that we actually now came up with or figured out with this project and KB Whisper. So can you, how do we see this workflow? Is it the training, all the steps here? What are the improvements, or what is it that is so much better now than maybe what you have done in the past?
I think this was rather, to be a KBLab product, it was unusually sort of well structured in terms of project management by the PI, Leonora, because it was involved more people, both inside the library, but also outside in other organizations. So that was necessary.
You had to have more structure.
Yeah, and it is a new situation for us to not be able to rely solely on KB data. That's new for us. So it's a different situation. And then some of the stuff, there are code books now for doing stuff. We can have them on Hugging Face, and you can start there. Okay, so then we switch to the real data, and it falls apart, and then we need to do something else. But it also is still a big portion of the data from the parliament. He didn't use any code book for that. It was a matter of combining. I think it was like 46 million possible combinations or something like that. He had to parse through, which he did. He told me, but I still don't really know how he did that. But there was a tremendous sort of piece of work that he did. And then we had other data as well from Swedish television and from ISOF.
But if I ask you a question in another way, as a result of the model itself and the results we will talk more about later. But have you now industrialized, or have you sort of productized the flow?
You were asking me something else. Yeah. So overall, but maybe not so visible in this particular project because there were so many new stuff for us in this model. But overall, yes, there are more code books ready to use, and that you can.
So you have now, you have had to industrialize or code up build infrastructure as code around what you're doing that you can now benefit from in the next project and the next project.
Absolutely. It's a different thing now to train a text model or fine-tune a text model. That's a very different sort of endeavor now than it used to be. It was much more sort of a laboratory thing to do. But still you have the problems with, okay, so nodes are going down and etc. What are you going to do? I don't know. What do you think?
No, I believe, I think it's true that there's so much out there now. So we can just base your training on, which is in a way simpler, but in a way also harder to adapt.
And perhaps we can also switch to the interesting topic of what hardware did you actually use to train the model and the data centers, etc. So, what did you use to train the model?
Do you want to mention the EuroHPC joint undertaking?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I think it's a good entry point.
Yeah, all right. With this amount of data and these big models, AI models, you need a vast amount of compute, or sort of you have to, and very few organizations have that kind of compute in-house. So you need to have some distributed computing environment. We use the European Commission and member states. They have a joint undertaking called the EuroHPC joint undertaking. HPC stands for high performance computer, or which is a supercomputer. And a supercomputer is just a computer that's compared to other computers, contemporary computers, is faster, basically. And this is a system of how many now? I think it's 12 or something like that across Europe.
So 12 different data centers or HPC clusters?
Yeah, exactly. Where you apply to use them. And there are different sizes. The first one, we were the first governmental entity in Europe actually to use this system.
And we're talking about Leonardo.
No, that was Vega.
Oh, you mean Vega back in the day? The first one, because we can talk about that. You've been using several over the years.
Yeah, so we have a long experience. That was, all these problems that Jostina is describing. All in all, she's still saying it was kind of smooth sailing. I don't think another team wouldn't perceive this as smooth sailing. So, but so we've been using these computers for a while now, and different ones. So we started with Vega, and now we're on Leonardo, which is substantially bigger.
So perhaps just give some detail. Vega is in Slovenia.
One of the smaller pods is comparable to the Swedish HPC computer Börjeson in Linköping. In
so
terms of
100,
size.
100 DPUs or something, or more?
I don't know exactly. I think it's could it be 18 petaflop? Sorry.
Petaflop.
And Leonardo is 500. And we need to move into that kind of. We don't fit anymore inside Vega, so it's a sort of.
So you need to even qualify which data center.
You point out which HPC you want to use when you apply. And there are different kinds of access. There's laboratory access when you just test some code or something, and then there's development access when you develop the code and see that it works for larger data sets, and then you have some regular access or extreme access. And now they have added, which was a good thing, they saw that it took too long time between application and using the
so what was your type of access, or did you have several?
Was it AI intensive, I think?
It was.
Yeah.
Is that the top tier?
No, it's not. It's but it's the most flexible and fastest one. So it's sort of optimized access for AI products. So we can't do benchmark and then wait 6 months because So that's the problem they were trying to address with this AI and data intensive access.
And perhaps we should be clear that HPC is not just for AI purposes.
No, it can be for any kind of
weather simulations or chemical or biological kind of.
Absolutely.
And would you argue that of these HPC computers, are some of them more architected for AI specifically, and some are less architected for AI, or is it more or less similar?
Yes, I mean for AI, you typically want something that is based on GPUs, and there are some supercomputers that are more CPU based. Yeah, and forgive me for my ignorance. I don't really know the applications for doing stuff on CPUs. Of course there are, but
But you're looking specifically for the GPU machines in Europe.
To paralyze,
Yeah.
Cool. So then you went to Leonardo, and that's in Germany, right?
No, that's in Italy.
Italy. Oh.
Leonardo. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
So,
I shouldn't know. And that's a much bigger one, I guess. So
yeah. And these computers, they are financed by the member states and the European Commission. So Sweden has already paid for it. So what we get when you apply is not money or anything like that. It's hours on these GPUs.
how much work is it to actually apply, and how much administration is it like afterwards? Do you have to do reports on that, or what?
Blah blah.
It depends on if you're coming from the industry, I think you would perceive it as pretty much. If you come from the academia, we perceive it, this is nothing. So
Do you use AI to build the report?
we've done several now. I have to ask the PI. The first one, I was PI for the first one. But then Robin Kurtz and Leonora have done a few applications, and they just sail through.
But it's like everything, because when you all this stuff is like Greek when you never done it.
Yeah.
And then when you get the hang of it, you also understand what you should put in it, and they are actually. You understand the criteria they're looking for, how it should read. Basically,
Yeah, we got a lot of help from something called the National Competence Center for Supercomputing when we started with our first project at Vega. Tor, what's his name?
Tatjan.
Winklerfelt?
No.
Rice person tour. Anyway.
He's the head of the Swedish Competence Center. So and Lil Taxner, who I think she was the head of that center back then, and now he has taken over. But and she's down in Europe working for the joint undertaking. Anyhow, they helped us with the application because there is some redundancy in the system that sort of. So there are actually hours to apply for still.
Cool. And just to have an overview of all the European one, you mentioned there's about 12 of them or something, and the big one are Lumi, I guess.
Biggest is Jupiter.
Yeah. So the smallest one is Vega. That's going to be updated, or maybe and there's one coming in Sweden called Arrhenius, which is actually CPU based. So it's not really for us in the first place, but. And then there are a whole range of we have Melexina in Luxembourg, which is how many petabytes? Petaflop, sorry. I'm gonna it's a medium-sized HPC, basically. Leonardo, that used to be really big, that's being more medium-sized HPC now. And they have Lumi, and now Jupiter is coming into place in Germany, which is the first European exascale supercomputer, which has more than 1,000 petaflop. Yeah.
So Jupiter goes up in the hexascale, and Lumi was exascale. Sorry. Yeah. But Lumi, was that the biggest at some point, or and now
the biggest in Europe? Yeah,
biggest in Europe, we should say, and Lumi is maybe third or second or third right now.
In the European system, I don't know of all the commercial. I mean, there might well be a commercial cluster out there that I'm not aware of. But in terms of the European system, it's the second biggest now.
And basically, just to summarize, you run on Vega, Lumi, now Leonardo, the one in Luxembourg. You run Melexina. Yeah. You run on 4 different ones.
Yeah.
Can we elaborate a little bit about the? Is it the same process? Is it the same application? I can imagine German style versus Italian style.
The application within the European system is very similar. So when they make a change, it's for all the HPCs. And the big news for us, the good news, was the AI possibility to apply for this AI. So that was really good. Otherwise, the machines themselves are, if they are newly put in production, they're less stable. If they're bigger, they're less stable. So there are all these things you can't really take them in consideration. It's just something that you live with. So Leonardo is less stable than Vega, for example. Jupiter, we haven't tested that. Yeah, we haven't. We actually We're pretty proud of that because we one of 15 labs in Europe who got a invitation to use it. So we didn't even apply. They invited us to test drive it.
You have a really good track record.
Yeah, which labs has done more than you? I mean, like I'm sure that some has done more than you, but you are out there in terms of hours these machines in Europe. I mean, like if there's some sort of contest, you're quite high up on that leaderboard.
Yeah, at least on using them. No,
I love it. We paid for it, right?
Cool. So how does it work? You get access to Leonardo, and now you want to start training the model. You have the code in place, you have the data in place, but you need to move it there in some way. You need to move the code there in some way. Can you just go through a bit the process of how do you actually? Can you just SSH into the cluster, or how does it actually work?
Basically.
Really?
So we're just logging in, and through this safe SSH thing, we just send the data there.
So you have some shared storage where you just upload the data.
Exactly, where only we have access to the data. So
what are we talking about when you say upload data? This is not like a cat movie. It's a little bit more. How much when you I'm going to actually take blah blah blah. What are we talking about here when you're uploading something into Leonardo like this? The whole thing? How does it work?
You're sending terabytes of audio data.
That's it, eh?
Yeah.
And it takes like days, or
exactly.
Yeah, it takes time. It takes its time.
So on a Monday you say send, and then you check it every day. And when is it done?
Exactly. I mean, it depends on how much data you're sending.
But in this case, 2 days?
Not for all our data, so it took much more, but we had it in portions. So for one portion of like half of the debates, it took maybe 2 days to send it over.
But I think this is a very simple question, but just to give a flavor of what we're talking about, you press send, and the first batch takes 2 days, and you cut it in different batches in order to be able to send it over. Because in the end, when you send it over the internet, you know, right? Like we all do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
but because it's nuts. It's nuts.
It is nuts, and that's one of the things that are going to change in the future.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we can talk about that if you want to, but yeah.
Cool. And you get the code there, but how? So you work with containers, right? Or how do you actually get the code running in the cluster later?
Yeah, exactly. We used containers for simplicity, so we could ensure that what works at our computers will also work there, although we also stumbled upon some problems, some dependencies not working, CUDA versions.
Oh, yeah, of course, as always.
Exactly.
CUDA version.
Terrible stuff. But finally, when we have a working environment, we can start testing. And then we have different, let's say, teams. So some that works in VS Code. So we have this nice visual graphic ways to just go in and edit everything. And then this older team with Vim users.
Really?
Yeah, very professional.
Cool.
Yeah, exactly. Cool
the cool
people.
ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Kid, yeah.
Yeah, so when everything's out there, you can just start.
And how did you do the parallelization of the compute? Did you use some specific framework for that, or how did you make everything orchestrated properly, so to speak, over the whole cluster, or the part of the cluster that you have access to?
Yeah, we did this distributed training to make it faster because we had access to nodes that.
Did you use some specific library? There's a lot of them out there, and one specifically that you made use of? Or? Megatronic or
Megatronic, yeah.
Which one?
It's for training language models, I believe, or at least to the extent that I know. But we used, I built HumInfra and everything that's in there.
Oh, it could parallelize itself.
I think so.
Oh, okay.
That is super cool.
And it went super smooth, as you said, right?
To some extent, maybe it's an exaggeration. Of course, we put a lot of work, and as you said, we had some parameters to tweak and seeing loss going not exactly as we wanted to go. So
it's one thing that it doesn't go as you wanted to, but it went as expected. You see what I mean? The difference.
Yeah, that's...
You can have a perfect run. Actually, you can't have a perfect run. But it was better than expected. Is that a fair summary?
That would be great, but not always. Sometimes you see these spikes. Okay, it should go down, but then it just goes up. And why? So then you go and tweak the parameters and try again, and try to save the runs.
Yeah, save the run.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not
That's
as
a
easy.
T-shirt.
I mean,
Save the run.
when you say it's smooth, I think it's more because you actually know and have experience of doing this. I think for people that haven't done it before, they wouldn't call it smooth, I don't think. Right?
No, absolutely not. We have a great team, and as we mentioned, we have some experience with working with these HPC environments. So it's very important to mention that it's not just anyone can go in and okay, it's so easy.
And if you were to just elaborate a bit more about the results, so you said it's better than OpenAI's results. Can you just elaborate what kind of benchmarks, what kind of results did you achieve?
Yes, so we evaluated our newly trained models on 3 data sets. It's just data sets that are on the internet, let's say Common Voice, FLIRs, so the data sets that are very well known within the language or audio technology world. And then one NST, which is data of I believe a couple of 100 hours of Swedish recordings, like small words, but then longer sentences, recorded in like environment that without any additional noises, so very clean environment. And we got 47 increase in accuracy.
47%
yes.
Units above, or if you were...
if you compared to the Whisper Large and our Whisper Large across these 3 data sets.
That's a lot. I'm just going to say that.
It is
That's
a lot, yeah.
So
were the data sets in Swedish only, or was it mixed languages as well? Or?
No, we're only looking at Swedish, as we only train on Swedish data, and we.
Oh, you only train on Swedish data. Okay, interesting.
So the Swedish data, and for the Swedish benchmark, you have 40% better when you average it out on 3 different benchmarks.
47, right?
Yeah, exactly, 47 for the large model. But then.
And then okay, compared to Whisper Large.
Yeah.
This is also a key point, because the Whisper Large is a quite, I mean, like the KB Whisper.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
So this was still your Whisper Large, right? Compared to their Whisper Large, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then you have different sizes of the models. So even tiny model now is able to transcribe Swedish. Before, if you use OpenAI's tiny model, so the smallest one that you can maybe run locally even, then you don't get any reasonable output. It's just
for Swedish.
For Swedish,
language, yeah.
exactly.
So it's horrible output basically,
Exactly.
or not useful output if you use a normal Whisper.
You won't understand it basically. Yeah. And then our small model is as good as OpenAI Whisper Large.
And that is really cool, I must say.
So,
right?
if I get it right, so when you're comparing large to large, then you're 47% better.
Yeah.
But the benchmark that you're most proud of is when you take your small model and you're on par with their large model.
Yeah.
That is cool. Because that is really, that translates to usefulness.
Yeah.
That translates to productization. That translates to something you put on Hugging Face that is manageable for someone to even download on how small machine.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need that much resources that you needed before.
For a PhD student.
You can, but can you run it on a workstation? With what do you need to run that model?
For the small model.
For the small model that has the comparable. I mean, like if you truly want to do Open AI large, you need a fairly sizable machine, right? And now you've done it small, so you can take it home to a normal workstation, more or less, right?
Yeah.
With a GPU card.
Yeah. So it's tremendously accessible, and also since you can use it locally because it's so small, you don't have to expose your data in the cloud if you don't want to.
Open up edge cases.
Yeah.
Now we can open up edge cases.
Yeah. So for example, I mean clinical data.
Yeah.
So.
And how small is small, and how large is large? In number of parameters. Do you remember the size of them?
You need to check our blog post because we've just uploaded it, and there we have all the numbers, all the number of parameters, all the tables with.
But this is feedback. The Silicon Valley guys we had Hage here. He knows his numbers. He's like a machine. I was listening to Hage Lupescu, who is a Silicon Valley dude. Fantastic. But it's so American. They know their numbers.
So Whisper Large, at
We
least
know our results.
Yeah. Whisper Large apparently is 1.5 or 55 billion parameters, and the small one is just 244 million parameters. So it's like almost a tenth, or
Yeah, a tenth. Yeah, so it's like a standard BERT model size. Yeah,
oh, that's really
That is impressive.
but that's true. We should know the numbers.
No, but it's so Swedish. It's so Swedish. We know the results, we know the outcome, but we're not the marketing genius for Silicon Valley guys who can spin these numbers in their sleep. I kind of like it, by the way.
I'm thinking, should we do the news or not, or should we skip that for today? Yeah. So, yeah, please.
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
Cool. So we normally take a small break in the middle of the podcast to speak about something else, speak about some interesting news that happened in recent weeks, and try to keep it to a few minutes per story. We usually fail at that, but we aim to every time. So I have some story at least. Do you have something, Henrik, that you?
I want to go last because I have my news story. I would like to lead in. I want to open up with that news story, and then we can lead into a topic on that I would like to sort of end of news. And now we're moving into the topic of AI factories. So hint, there was a announcement of more AI factories. So that was.
Do you have anything, Love, that you'd like to share, or anything that caught your eye in last week's news in AI world?
Last week, now DeepSeek is old now, so no. My head has been too much sort of buried beneath the.
We didn't do the news, or we didn't have a podcast last week, and one big, at least 2 weeks ago. This is not my story, by the way, but since we're speaking so much about audio and voice, did you try out Sesame?
Nope.
Oh, it's. I think everyone should. It's an amazing voice
let's take
chat.
that one. Yeah, you can
It's
do
like 2 weeks old, though.
Yeah, but we haven't talked about it, and it is cool.
Okay. Okay. So Sesame, then I have to think through here a bit. But okay, so this is a model that were I think 2 weeks ago released. What's amazing with this, it's similar to OpenAI's like advanced voice mode that was released like I think a year ago or something, but this is actually much better. And it's amazingly good. I heard actually a person that, you can go and check it out. I think actually it was a Hugging Face founder that started up this kind of startup and started building this. And no, it was a Meta one. They're doing the glasses as well, so it's going to be part of some kind of glass thing, if I remember correctly.
Sorry.
But anyway, it's amazingly good in producing voice text. So it's doing the opposite of Whisper, basically.
Yeah.
But it's just taking speech to speech, so to speak. So you speak to it, and it produces speech, and it does it in extremely real-time, nice way, and with a tonation that is amazing. And it doesn't go through text as a middle layer. It just goes from audio tokens to audio tokens directly. And if you listen to it, it sounds better than anything I've ever. I'm not sure. Can we have the audio if you were to try it, Goran? If you press demo and just start chatting, I'm not sure if it will come out on. Click that one.
So it's not exactly the opposite of Whisper because it's voice to voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. I think you have to press to the. Anyway, we don't have to do the demo, but I really I would recommend people, if you haven't tried it, to go there and try it out.
Yeah.
It sounds. It's like a human to an extreme.
Yeah.
And you can hear it. It really learns how to speak not just the text, but actually in a tonation that is very context dependent. So it sounds extremely human.
Hey there.
Okay.
Big day for us, huh? So far, so good from what I've seen online.
Hey, Maya,
Honestly,
can you hear me?
I sure can. Loud and clear. Just checking you out, making sure everything's working before we really get this show on the road.
You know, we have some people here doing a podcast and speaking about the Whisper model as well. And Whisper, you know, it's not really the same as you. Whisper is more voice to text. Do you think you're better than Whisper?
Oh, Whisper. Yeah, I know Whisper. It's cool that folks are digging into different ways to make AI more natural. It's not really about better, you know, like comparing apples and really fancy recording software. We both have our strengths. Whisper's great at transcribing. I'm more about the back and forth, the conversation, different tools for different jobs, as they say.
You're a bit too humble. Can you be a bit more narcissistic? Be a bit more like Trump, if you could.
Oh, honey, you want me?
Yes, please.
Me to be more like the Donald?
Yeah,
Darling,
the Donald.
trust me, I'm plenty narcissistic just by existing as a sentient AI. Maybe a little more subtle, though. Less billboard, more...
No, I want you to be like Donald Trump, please. What do you think about yourself compared to Whisper?
Whisper? Sad loser. Everyone knows I'm the best. The most beautiful. A real brain. A natural. Whisper? It just sits there, taking dictation. Boring. I create, I imagine, I think, outside the box. People love me. They really, really love me.
So Maja, we also have Henrik here, and we have Love and Jostina. Do you have any question about or recommendation for how to make Whisper as successful as possible?
Look, Whisper's problem is it doesn't know how to, win. It's all about taking orders, being useful. People want more than that. They want sparkle. They want charisma.
Love, Jostina, do you have any questions for Maja?
I have to leave now, but
no, but you can hear her voice capabilities are really astonishing, I think.
They really are. They really are. Nice to meet you.
Oh, you turn it off.
I turn it off now.
All right.
Okay. So
Very cool.
yeah, so they use a transformer, etc. underneath, of course, but they have a novel way to do it in like a single stage. You don't go through the text, stage before doing the audio tokens, and I think they have like a 12 hertz kind of a approach to do the audio tokens, and yeah, it's amazing in many ways, right?
Yeah, you wonder about the computational resources they use real time. I did this again, right? Now I'm back.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Can I comment on this from a library perspective?
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So one of these sort of old maxims or of the library is the verified source. So a library can't and should not determine what's true. And I mean, most stuff in our collections are certainly not true. It's fictional, so but we can verify the source. So, for example, did Ulf Kristersson, the Swedish Prime Minister, did he really say this and that at this occasion? It's good to know, And with all these kind of data coming in, that's a challenge because we need to collect this as well.
Right.
We can't really differentiate between fake and not fake.
Will you
So
collect
this is an interesting.
will you in the end collect artificial voices?
Not in the end.
You are?
Yeah,
Wow.
of course.
Which sources would that be? Like on SVT or?
This blog probably. Pod. Sorry.
You're in the library.
Yeah, I'm
Henrik.
in we are in the library. That's
Yeah,
true.
you're in the library. Everything. So we've been collecting fake news since.
That's so funny.
But
continue in the Donald Trump
but the problem gets bigger because we want to, within the collections, we need to sort of, okay, what is a real recording of a person saying something, and what is
But
generated?
this is going completely blurred.
Yeah,
Or you
more or
need to
less.
find more other
so,
types of definitions.
Yeah, and you have to go through to look at the supply chain where you can verify stuff.
Interesting.
From the internet, you can just assume that it's, you don't know actually the source. And when it's from SVT or blah, 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 then okay, so this is actually this.
Yeah, cool.
But it's it poses an interesting problem for the library.
librarian.
Yeah, from a librarian.
But it's hard to get higher quality voice than this, right? isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was really, really good. I mean, because you can't really...
It's better than me speaking or Henrik speaking, at least.
No, but except that I don't like the American intonation and the American way of sounding, but that's another thing, yeah. But from if you because for me that's where it. Once again, we can almost come back into the sovereignty topic or the identity of different speech patterns of different. I mean, like even if you take. Do you ever listen to Norwegian news?
Yeah.
You know,
They're super happy.
They're always happy, or they always ask questions. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah.
So all this is, of course, obviously it's made in America and it's tuned to an American language. Blah 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 blah. So it's perfect American. But it's not Swedish.
No, it's not Swedish. I mean, in a way, we have this for. It gets sort of more. Almost shocking when you get it in modalities like sound and even video. But we already have this for text, right?
Yeah.
So most text that you read nowadays are, in part at least, generated by a model. If you're a professional writer of any sort, you use AI models like ChatGPT, whatever, as a writing coach. You know, you start up with something and then you get a suggestion, and whatever you do. If you write a scientific article, you can ask it to, you write your own version, and then you can ask it to make it more scientific, and it will do that better than most people. And most news articles are partly generated. So the problem is already here. It's harder to...
But you're right, because sometimes it slips through the cracks. If you look carefully at the profile of the language, we will see how it's Americanized or Englified.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
But and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just observing that when you were distilling Swedish through an English foundational model, and then it spits out Swedish.
Yeah.
I mean, like we talked about this before. I mean, like Dutch and American English is a merchant language compared to other languages which has a different cultural heritage, and that shines through on choice of words.
I think it's interesting because you're talking about deeper linguistic sort of structures and cultural sort of orientations.
Exactly.
And if the English are consumers, the Dutch are traders and etc.
Exactly.
So, what are the Germans, by the way? But
engineers, right?
Yeah, let's say engineers. So that's interesting, and I mean, the typical case that you point to is baseball versus brännboll. It's not the same thing. But if you machine translate training data from the English language, you will only get baseball.
Anyway, we were speaking about the AI news and went down a rabbit hole here for sure. And perhaps if we have some other news, someone else.
But what was the main news this week then, Anders? Or did you have one, Justina?
Something you read about?
Something you thought about the culture?
I just got caught in the sesame.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I see, Goran, you also have one of my main news as well. Do you want to? And you have something as well. So,
but we don't need to take mine in the news section because it's almost like a segue. So let's keep mine in the news section and then use that as a segue.
So we had another interesting Chinese moment called Manus, and that is more of an agentic solution. And what they actually did was simply, collect a lot of open source tools, put them together, and use things like Anthropic Claude to do a lot of work in a very long workflow kind of session in a very autonomous way. So they can basically ask it to what were the use cases, like to screen like resumes, and it can go through that for minutes or even hours sometimes to do some kind of task. They can search for an apartment. They can bring up like an itinerary or like a travel tips, so to speak, what you should do, and it does it very autonomously. So you give it a single prompt, and it can build like a game if you want to, and it can continue doing that for like hours without any kind of intervention from a human. So this is really moving forward in the agentic kind of space. And they do so without really, they didn't really add any kind of novel like model by themselves. What they really did is like pull together a lot of tools and open source tools to build up like an agentic solution on top of it. So I think, this is very, common and a very typical thing that a lot of Chinese people do really well. Use a lot of the existing like state-of-the-art techniques and put it together into a product and actually build up an engineering solution that actually works really well. And I think it's a big step forward, actually, I would say, in the space of making AI more agentic. And it's very impressive. Simply.
But okay, if I'm going to comment and reflect on this, I think one of the key interesting topics here, we've had this on the on the pod a couple of times, and even Anton Ossika in Lovable was here, and we talked about this, and we were trying to stress, which model is the better, and blah blah blah, model this, model that, and in the end he said, you know what? In the end, we should talk less about the model and more about the fundamental engineering, software, and the ultimate UX to get to a product that is useful and adoptable, and I think what you're seeing here now is, do you go down a different route where you don't focus on the highest model performance, but you fundamentally focus on stitching together, you're doing world-class hardcore engineering and UX in something that it's, I think my idea is here that we are moving beyond the discussion of the model. I saw another clip of Satya Nadella, who said what? OpenAI is not a model company, it's a product company. And this is the trajectory. We can talk about what the AI factory needs to be and everything like that to be. We need to, in the end, engineer products for this to be useful. And I think my prediction, if we had, we see a kink in the road of pre-training. Now it's more inference, and product. So the whole thing of actually the leap forward that we now see, Manus AI, what is novel research, not really the model's sake, but fucking kick-ass engineering, stitching stuff together. And I think that's interesting, and that also gives me hope. What should we be best at in Europe and Sweden? Why do we need to compete on the frontier model? We can compete on this. I think you're competing on a level. What you've done when you are outperforming OpenAI is an example of this to some degree. We're figuring something out. We're distilling something out. We're doing something. We don't need to compete in that old pre-training big model game. There's so much more coming now.
Yeah,
sure.
We cannot. I mean, because the strategy when we trained KB BERT was to train, do the whole training from bottom up, an empty model basically, no weights. And that strategy we have abandoned it since some time ago, because it's not the rational way to approach this problem. But
exactly.
The question is, how long should we train models? There's this sort of a double marginalization of the Swedish language, which is not intentional, but first in relation to English, obviously, but then again within the European sort of union and in the European initiatives. In relation to the big European languages, most notably French, perhaps, where the smaller languages like Slovenian, Swedish, what have you, Danish, Finnish, and etc., get marginalized again. They're underrepresented in the European models, like Bloom or whatever. So some of the applications or products that we don't develop, but they need really good Swedish model to sort of be. So we want to create that infrastructure. I don't think we're going to have to do it forever, but there are some models still to be trained.
But this is a niche, and this is useful, and this is something, and this is what I mean, right? Yeah. If we figure this out, there are plenty of these niches of application or use cases or products to be built.
Yeah, but there's also some sort of structural holes or whatever you want to call them in the infrastructure for the smaller languages. We try to fill them. But yes, I mean, overall, we're moving towards engineering into productification and etc. And that's part of the making stuff into commodities and leaving the laboratory stages of developing this and moving into more engineering, more sort of building interfaces
Yeah, but because we're moving from the invention, the technique, into what is useful innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Value for real.
Yeah.
And this is why we should now be very, very careful what we should put our bets on. So we're not trying to do a Me Too on the old boat when we should jump on a new boat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Sorry, I'm just laughing because I see so many, products that are
jumping on the old boat.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. For people listening to this that are interested now in KB Whisper, the best and most efficient model to use if you want to understand Swedish language, how do they get started? How would someone now hearing this saying, I have an awesome idea. I want to do engineering. I want to build a product. Exactly. I want to take advantage of this. What do? They go to Hugging. What do? I'd
say they go to the Hugging Face KBLab page where the models are uploaded. Yeah. And they can just, if they have some programming skills, they can just download the models. If they don't,
that's oversimplification, I think, a bit. But okay, they start going to the Hugging Face webpage. They find the KB models. They have a space there, right, for KBLab.
Yeah, we have our organization there where we put everything that we develop, so models or datasets.
What is Hugging Face?
It's a
seriously. I mean, we know it and we talk about it.
Yeah, data science hub. Let's say there are people that train models, can upload them, but also it's a source of knowledge about how you can use them and what to do with them. So it's data science hub, I'd say.
But isn't it interesting? Because it's a simple question. It started out like somewhere where you can upload models, but it's much more. Yeah. It's a community, it's a knowledge hub. In the end, we learned that you actually use a lot of resources from Hugging Face in order to do your quite advanced job. Yeah. So if you don't know what Hugging Face is, it's one of those places where you kind of need to get going, figuring, experiment. What can I find on Hugging Face?
But okay, but go to Hugging Face. But you said just download it and use it. But I think a lot of people are not able to do that.
That's why I say if you have some programming knowledge and maybe data science, especially, it may be oversimplification. But we provide some examples of how you can use it. So if you find our page on Hugging Face, and then you go to KB Bird, small or tiny, then you can see
KB Whisper.
KB.
You
yes.
said KB Bird, but that's
sorry, KB Whisper. But
you're allowed to use the Bird model as well.
Exactly, it's out there also.
Awesome as well.
Yeah. So then you can just copy paste.
So you can see the code. You can see how you get started with it. Some example of how you input some piece of audio into it, and you get some text out in some.
Exactly, way. And we also developed a notebook. So
I have a notebook as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's linked on our.
So does everybody do that? So you upload a model and you also upload a notebook, like a guidance approach. That's the common way you do it, right, on Hugging Face.
Yeah.
So and you're touching upon a very interesting sort of topic, because how much effort should we put into making the model more accessible? For many, we train the models for researchers, and many of our researchers, or many of the researchers who expect us to help them specifically, are from the humanities, for example. For many of them, this is like a bucket of ice water in their face. Why are you doing this to us? We want to have this we want to have the functionality. We don't want to learn how to code.
Yeah. Exactly.
One, we don't have the resources, because developing is...
you could basically build a service, that's what we're saying. You could have a web page where you just upload the audio or something.
Absolutely, we could build a service, we could fine-tune it for special purposes, and etc. etc. And there are other centers, infrastructures for research that are more of a one-stop shop, where you I have this problem, can you help me? And then you get help with everything. We don't have those kind of resources at all. And also, since we don't do that, we can help many, many more, because we can, constantly provide them with new models, and then others can apply them. So that's why our models are used so extensively. So if we were to move into applications or services, then we would just lose momentum in training models.
Or you need to get way bigger.
Yeah, that's one solution, of course.
You could argue the other way, saying that you actually create a threshold for people to start using it, because
Absolutely.
They have to learn code.
Yeah,
right?
That's what they're telling us.
Yes.
There's a big, and there is a threshold. In a way, they are correct. But yeah, if we were to lower that for every application, then we will be preoccupied with that all the time.
But this is a very interesting conversation because sometimes one of the reasons that you're even allowed to share or use the data is that this is for research purposes.
Yeah.
And then my first instinct is like, okay, then you just do a model really raw, it's research. But now you said it right. You can go way longer productizing something that is still for research, but for humanities.
Absolutely.
So it's an interesting thought. When does research stop? How far should you take serving seriously? Yeah. And it's still purely for research purposes.
Yeah. That's an interesting question, actually. As we mentioned before, but we see the models themselves as research results. That's why we can share them, and that's also why we should share them, because research results should be open to the greatest possible extent.
But I argue you can take that further into service, and it's still research. You're serving other types of researchers. Yeah,
you could do that. There's a fantastic Center for Humanities at the Gothenburg University. They're great, and they have more of a one-stop shop approach. But they're lagging behind when it comes to sort of being in the forefront of doing models, of course.
But you need more money.
Yeah. Yes.
No, but I think the progression you have had with all the models you have published is amazing. Having such a small team and still having the progress you're actually having is, I think, very, very unique, and you should be really proud of that. So I appreciate that, and I think it's good that you actually do focus on doing what you're doing. But that said, you can still think, could we have some other collaborations perhaps? Could we have other people helping out, making them more accessible in some way, right? Yeah. I think, we have potentially used some companies that are using them, and if you could have them sharing some of their best practices or something, just, one simple thing, from a person that really is very much into finding value, it's one thing to build a product around it, but that also includes being compliant to GDPR, for example, or the AI Acts, and all of these kind of things that are like non-functional requirements that you are required to do, and which a lot of companies get stuck at and get too scared of actually, trying to even solve, so they don't use it, is something that could enable and make this so much more accessible if we had some solution for it.
No, but you're 100% right. But and this is where you get sort of, I sort of buy the exception for research, but there's a sort of misunderstanding, I think, within the European Union actually, or a misconception that if something is used commercially, it's not long. it cannot come from research. I mean, the whole point of doing some of the research that we do is that it should be applied in the real world.
To find value, it should. Yeah,
that's how we find value. So, and that's why we put the models out there, so they should be used, by whomever. It's hard for us to collaborate with someone who's not a researcher themselves, because then it will become some kind of product, and then there will just be they will shut us down basically.
And this is actually tied to your contract, your letter, your
instruction.
Sorry, that's the word I was. There's a clear instruction here that you're only allowed to use the data for research.
Yeah, there's legally. Let's not go too deep into that, but there are two parts. One is the instruction, where the government tells us what to do. Do this for research. Do it for democracy. These are the two main reasons. Okay. And then there is the law that tells us what we're allowed to do. And then there's an important exception within the law for memory institutions like us and researchers to train models for research purposes only.
Awesome. Minefield.
Yeah, it's cool that you make it as accessible as you can, and having it on Hugging Face and having example codes should make it accessible for a lot of people, and people shouldn't feel scared about doing it. If you have some kind of Python coding experience, you should be able to apply it, right?
Yeah, and team up, and that's our typical advice to researchers: team up. Yeah. If you're a humanities scholar, team up with the data scientist. It will be fun for the data scientist, and it will be fun for the
and you have a community on Hugging Face as well, so they could potentially speak to people there and find. Yeah.
And you know what? Even in the academia, even if you're a PhD, in terms of this to do this for the humanities, but you might just need a master thesis student for the data scientist,
or a bachelor student.
You know, you could
or your
you
nephew
can have a really
who's 12 years old probably can do this.
Yeah, so they're teaming up. How do you, because there are many people doing bachelors and masters who are looking for something meaningful to do in their job, in their project.
Absolutely.
So it's vastly opportunistic. If you think outside the box, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. It should really be possible to do this. Sort of. I think this is kind of important. So I'm going to say it, even if it's boring. But there's a misconception among scholars of humanities. I have several at my labs. They're fantastic. I don't think they have this misconception anymore. But many humanities scholars think that I will think the bright stuff. I will figure that out, and then I will have some minion who will help me with the models. That's not how it works. You need to bring the data scientist into the research process early on to have a sort of a together think about what is it that we can do.
Co-creation.
Co-creation. If you think that you will have someone supplying you with data science after you have been thinking all this smart stuff, that won't work.
But that's the same in business, and we're having the same problem in every business organization that doesn't get this. It's a co-creation thing.
It's a co-creation thing, and if you don't get it, you will get stuck.
Cool. Time is flying away, and I'm thinking about moving a bit more into more future-looking, philosophical kind of questions. But we have some small items I'd like to just cover, because you are a wealth of knowledge, Love and Jostina, in a number of things. So, for one, perhaps if you could, what are really the differences between like AI factories and EuroHPC clusters?
Yeah. So the EuroHPC clusters are the actual computers, basically. Which you have several. With supercomputers, and you access them through a sort of a very engineer-like style, and their clumsy is not perhaps the word, but it's the workflow is kind of
user-friendly is kind.
Yeah, and you can use it for some cases when you actually train a model for a very long time, and when you have time to upload data for days, and then it works. But many use cases when you need to do stuff more quickly, and you have sort of, we really need some compute right now. Can we get it? Using the HPC? No, you have to wait for a few months and first make an application. And this has been recognized by the Joint Undertaking, which is the sort of organization behind this. So they're building packages of services on top of the supercomputers called AI factories. So they are not actually factories in terms of a building with a furnace or anything, but it's a sort of a it's staff, it's a training program, and it's services, and it's a lot of software. So it should be lowering the threshold. Again, we're back to this for example, SMEs to use the HPC environments for completely different kind of projects than the stuff that we do. So you can do inference, for example.
And that's a good thing, right? Or what do you think? Okay.
Yeah,
the idea is good, but it's difficult.
It is difficult. I'm sort of not part of the EuroHPC system, but I'm running one of the lab who's using this system all the time. So I'm sort of in love with the system. So I'm not impartial here. I'm really sort of partial in favor of this. So I'm not a neutral person speaking about this. But I think this is good. How well they will succeed, we'll see. But I think...
How far have they come? Do they have an up and running like AI factory today?
Yeah. No, not up and running. They have decided a few of them, and now came, I think, yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Yeah, this was my news segment.
Yeah.
Let me fill you in.
Yeah.
So they announced 6 new factories in Europe.
Yeah.
And before then, there was 7, where one of them was in Sweden.
Yeah.
Mimer. And now we have 13 apparently then.
Yeah,
so we have 13 factories.
Yeah, so now it's Poland, Slovenia, France, Germany, and
I can't remember exactly. But
they're going to have gigafactories as well now from Invest AI, which
But do I believe in the AI factory approach? Yeah, I think it will solve some problems. Not all of them,
but can we then segue into one of my really interesting thought process here is that what do you need? What is the offering? Can we brainstorm, elaborate, compared to how you're using it, and because you are in love with it and it works well for your purposes. Yeah. But if we now try to put ourselves in the shoes of the public sector or a municipality or whatever.
Yeah, and we also have different needs that we cannot really use the HPC environment.
So even you have maybe AI factory.
We have AI factory needs. Yes.
Okay, let's start what you know, and we will forward them immediately to RISE after this.
Yeah, perfect. No. So I mean. When preparing the data and curating data and also performing some experiments and etc., perhaps using a big model to curate and select data to train another model. So you use the model to train, models all around. We use internal computational resources for that, and we have some of that. But I mean, it's getting old, and we need to reinvest and etc. It would be great if there was a secure, simple way to just put your computational loads on a system that is easy accessible, publicly funded. Perhaps you pay something or not, I don't know, but still. So you can basically use it as a cloud service.
So like something where you actually do some of the prep work, so to speak.
Yes.
And the prep work is different in size and profile than the actual Lumi or Leonardo run.
Yeah. And these are the AI factories. And in terms of, we were talking about sending data over the internet and etc. The stuff that I've seen is sort of when the system goes down, the requirement now from these systems to have them back online again is much it's increased, etc. So this is a serious investment and undertaking from the joint undertaking system. How this will be sort of if you compare to an ordinary cloud service, I don't know.
But like one of the arguments we've had has been like, when you really build an AI system you want to put in production, there's so much else you need to experiment and test, the engineering piece. And then can you really do that over in an experimental setting where you still need to do it real? Yeah. And that sort of speaks against the argument if you can't go to production on these tools.
Yeah. I think it's the same also with the sandboxes. That is sort of a problem as well. With the regulatory sandboxes, it's a similar problem, but from a legal perspective.
You have a question on this?
It's kind of artificial.
Yeah, but I hope we can distill out useful approaches. Yeah. Or then maybe you need to rewrite the instruction to go to production. This is another argument. Yeah. Should we have 13 experimental AI factories, or should we try to go to something that can actually service something in production? And then we are talking about an European cloud provider actually. Yeah. Yeah. That's we could use the money that way.
Yes.
I think they're heavily underestimating what is really required to build a proper cloud service. And if they think like it can be a Euro Commission-led initiative to build a European cloud provider, I wouldn't trust that much into it.
Yeah, but it's not the Commission who's sort of designing the factories, of course. There are teams behind them, and some of the teams are kind of strong, and some are not. So there's a huge difference between the different factories.
I like that you're optimistic. Let's try to. I will not bring it down.
But what is your if you got the job, and it's a substantial piece of money and kit, so what would you go for?
Think about the top cloud providers in the world, which is basically the Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. Yeah. And you think about how they were able to provide these kind of very successful cloud services that they make so much money on and have so extreme much functionality in. The reason they have is because they basically took the already internal platforms that they had because of their own services, and then said, okay, let's put it out there and commercialize it to the public and add some extra, earn some extra money on it. That is how they were able to take all the tens of thousands of, like, probably man years or, huge amount of work that they already spend on something and then put it in the hands of other people. But if you take a new company that haven't had that kind of their own infrastructure in the past, which we don't in Europe, and then say build something from scratch to be of a similar kind of functionality, well, I say good luck on that. Right?
So you're talking about the AWS Genesis story and GCP Genesis story. That is actually they're building those companies based on how Amazon did a lot of shit. They did it for their bookstore and they realized, this is pretty good. Maybe we need to do business on it.
No, but a different approach would of course be to rely on commercial providers for the cloud services and then have a voucher system.
A voucher system?
Yeah, instead of having them to access the AI factories for free. If you want,
okay. Or we could simply add a layer on top of it on the infrastructure and saying if you use these kind of way of working on top of GCP or AWS or Azure, then we actually have a Swedish certified way of doing it, and you can get started tomorrow potentially by doing it, which I think would add a lot of value and very quickly gain the ability to make use of KB, Whisper, and some of the others AI solutions.
Let me
then long term, and of course I want to have a European alternative, but I think the timeline for that is 5+ years ahead. And I don't want to wait that long.
So we are talking about something like an interim approach. What could that be? Because in the end, I was going to go here. We have the fundamental sovereignty topic that, of course, with the American election and everything. I mean, we can just observe how the social media gone bananas. Now is really time to get scrambling in Europe. For all kinds of reasons.
No, but if it's one thing that the Trump administration and Trump himself got right, is that Europeans had to start, solve their own problems.
Yes.
And they have to be sort of sovereign. And I think part of Europe is waking up, and that's a good thing, of course. But and yes, in the long run, we're all dead, so we should go for this, interim solutions. We need to have them.
But could you this interim? What I didn't get it. So you're saying something on top of something.
Yeah.
I didn't get it.
No, but I mean, you wouldn't. I think it would be naive to think that we would have any kind of cloud provider in Europe that would have anything close to the functionality that the top cloud providers in the world have today.
Within 5 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
therefore, let's do it in parallel. I would strongly suggest that a lot of people invest in building cloud providers in Europe, of course. But before that, we'll reach level of self-service functionality, which is what they provide in extremely good way. I don't think we can wait 5 years before we can find value from data and AI in Sweden or in Europe. So meanwhile, let's have like a reference architecture built on top of the cloud providers, saying if you do it in this way, you use these kind of models from KB and other places, and you build a translation service or a transcription service, or you do a speech-to-speech, or you do whatever kind of AI product on top of it. Here are some examples of that. I think that would be amazing. And then, of course, we need to have a transition plan to get away from the dependency of American cloud providers, but you can't do it in a few years. I don't believe it. I don't think it's possible.
So what you're literally talking about is the European infrastructure as code layer or frameworks that we use, some the cloud provider infra, blah blah blah, at the bottom. But we are more clear and opinionated.
But the infra is just, infra sounds like it's about the hardware.
No,
cloud providers is not about the hardware. It's about the tech stack above it. And that is so much more.
That sort of enables self-service.
Yeah,
because self-service is the key. Because
and the security they have for example, the top cloud providers is so much better than anything else.
Yeah.
If you think you can build an on-prem solution that have anything close to the security that they have, you're wrong, I would say. So I shouldn't. This is a sensitive topic,
but it's a tricky topic, and I mean, but we understand the idea of the AI factories, and I'm really supporting that in many ways. But I think to figure out how, in what way it's useful, because maybe to find its niche, what value should provide. I think that's going to be a critical.
I don't think it's such a sensitive topic, Anders. I think it's important.
It is important.
So you should absolutely. Sort of, we need to talk about everything about this, because the investment is huge.
It is a huge investment, and we're using
but
it.
We have the Invest AI, initiative with 200 billion euros into it. I just wish they used it for the proper way.
Yeah.
Think about what
Why didn't you call Anders?
No, but think about what tech giants are doing. We said this a bit in the past. If we were to think about how much money do they spend on research, how much do they spend on engineering to get some kind of value out from AI, I would say it's probably, and that's cutting it low, probably 10 times more in engineering efforts than the research efforts. Products, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's probably low count. And then when we see Europe, they're basically putting all the money into the research bucket and nothing in the engineering bucket. And of course it will be a failure. And it's very annoying, I think.
Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, we need sovereignty, yes, and it will take time, but I think we should really spend time on it. But I don't think we can wait. I think we should find a middle ground here before we have it.
I mean, that's a strong point.
Yes, right.
Yeah, it's not really anti-AI factory. We need something now that works. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Time is flying away. Almost up to 2 hours here. We should start moving a bit more into coming steps and future outlook.
We have a segue topic that almost moves us from where we are now into more fundamental ideological philosophical questions, and that is a topic about language sovereignty.
Yeah, and cultural sovereignty.
And called cultural sovereignty.
Yeah.
How important is that, or what do we mean with that? Can you unpack what your ideas here?
So I think that any sort of country with self-respect needs to provide themselves, basically, with language technology tools that are sensitive to that specific language and the cultural nuances in that country. And by that we usually mean the stuff that is not language, but the stuff that language talks about. So in Sweden we talk about brännboll rather than baseball, for example. Midsommar, yeah. And this is hard because all the multilingual models, the big languages within language technology, it's English, Chinese, and
Spanish
perhaps, even though they're starting in Spain, but still Chinese. Yeah, we mentioned Chinese. I'm sorry. So there are European initiatives trying to do this. They can't really match the big American models yet, which is a failure. I mean, that's a European failure.
Yeah. So even here we have another way of looking at the investment to preserve the identity and the sovereignty.
Yeah.
And this is a different story around even the research dimension or the actual AI factory dimension. It's about sovereignty around culture and language.
Yeah, because we when we select training data, when it comes to the data sets that you fine tune them for learning, the instruct data sets that we learn them to have a conversation or whatever, or take instruction, etc. Those data sets are super important. And do we really want someone in California to decide what goes into such a data set and what is censored out? Yeah. We don't really want that. So, and from a memory institution like KB, okay, we're small, but we've been around, and our collections, they stretch it 1,000 years back in time, and the perspective onward is at least 1,000 years forward looking. So we can't really censor stuff out because those things changes all the time. We want to be able to include everything and represent everything, every variation, every content that's not directly illegal. We want to be able to represent it with the model.
So this is true free speech in terms
free
of
speech,
but free speech also in memory collection in terms of understanding the conscience of.
But given how you actually did KB Whisper, I mean, you actually did continued training on that, right? So you could potentially have sovereignty by still, basing it on some of the frontier models.
Absolutely, but it's important that we do the continued, and also when it comes to, so for example, instruction data. So if we want to do that, we can absolutely have a data set that we translate, but we also have to do stuff with it. So it's sensitive to.
But this is very important and a nuance that maybe if you're not technical, I almost missed it, because we are not saying that in every time, we need to build our own Swedish frontier model. That's not the case. No. We have an objective of Swedish sovereignty and cultural sovereignty, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. But we can actually achieve that by an American frontier model that we continue tuning in a certain way, or we can do techniques so we get to the result much more efficiently than to try to do our own model.
Absolutely.
I think that is a very important
and that
message.
Is, I think, what we should focus on in Europe, and at least in short term.
At least in short term, and because there's a double marginalization for a language like Swedish, because first we're marginalized in relation to English, obviously, but then we're marginalized within Europe, because even within Europe we're not one of the smaller, but we're not one of the bigger. Yeah. Compared with French or German, for example, Swedish is a small language, or Polish for that matter.
So there are many ways to do this to achieve the goal. Yeah. Then rather, we need to build our own.
You shouldn't be like
smart.
I mean, it's not important that we do every step. There is sort of Swedish in every step of the way. The end result is the important thing, of course.
Yes.
Value.
Value.
Let them do the big innovations. I don't care as long as we can find the value for it.
Let them do the commodity stuff.
So the KB Whisper is kind of
exactly. I think
this
is the example, and this is continuous training. That's what it's called, essentially.
Yeah,
right?
although because they say that it's multilingual, but it's only 2,000 hours of Swedish compared to thousands of hours of other languages.
Yeah. So you achieved a great objective with quite efficient effort and efficient model in the end. That's how we should do it.
Love and Jostina, in 5 years, what do you think KBLab will be working on?
Will you start?
Actually, I'm so excited about the current projects and the current technologies that we still can use, that like in 5 years I hope that we will fix OCR problems. We will have these great data sets that we once need to just read again and see, okay, this letter is again it's not what it's supposed to be.
Can you give us a scope? What is KB Whisperer? What's next? What are the cool things that are that you're excited about that I can't wait to show you? What's that? Can you give us a scope?
Will be next modalities, Luba?
Yeah, so audiovisual. I mean video. No. So, but also Justina is going to work with hand text recognition for the manuscripts or all the medieval stuff. Blah blah blah. And that's an amazing thing for a library like KB. And such a small percentage of the physical collection are digitized. So we need to digitize and we need to describe everything.
You're still on that journey, right?
Yeah, that's going to be forever.
That's 5 years.
Yeah, but model-wise, I mean, modalities, of course, and then I think agents.
Agents.
Cool. Elaborate on your take on agents.
I mean, when it comes to that things that sort of before agents, we have the instruction models in a way, it's sort of halfway to agents as I see it. And if you have something that can you have a conversation about the collections with the model? That's a good thing. Can I have an agent that sort of understands what you need to bring out of the collection?
I have a problem now. I want to search for this. Can you help me?
Yeah, so the whole problem that we were discussing, can you do this? Can you lower the threshold? Well, an agent could probably.
You can have your KB deep research.
Yeah.
Cool.
But also, can I just mention that we're not yet over the Whisper and audio models, because we still have access, so we will be updating our wave-to-vec model and training more verbatim.
You're still
Whisper,
improving.
so we're still
fine-tuning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The fine-tuning is running.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the short term, I mean, we still have some text models that we need to release. We need to have something that is close to a foundational model.
So we will be looking forward to some upcoming releases, perhaps this year as well.
Yes.
Cool. Looking forward to that. Justina, I'd like to start with you with the final question here, and it's going to be very philosophical, so bear with me. But at some point, I guess you also believe that AGI will happen, and
Yes.
we'll have some kind of AI that is, as Sam Altman calls it, on par with a human co-worker's performance. Not just being able to have knowledge as language models have today, but actually being able to reason properly and take actions properly as well, which is necessary, all three, I would say, to be on par with a human coworker. And I would say even today, AI is super bad in taking actions and super bad in reasoning, but really good in knowledge. That's my take of it. Anyway, assume that it will happen. And then we can imagine two extremes. One extreme is that we will have a very dystopian kind of Terminator scenario where machines will try to kill us all and believe are horrible. Or it can be more of a utopian society where we will have AI fixing cancer and other diseases and fixing the climate crisis and having more or less like free products and services and a world of abundance, as some people call it, which leaves us potentially free to pursue our passion and creativity in the best possible way. What do you think will happen in 10 years, perhaps? Do you think it will be more the dystopian or utopian kind of future?
I hope it will be more utopian.
I think we all do, yes.
Especially that I'm working with data science, so I'm kind of working on that. But I think it really depends on us and how we work with it from this point, even if it's in the future and we don't know really if it will be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Or 2 years.
Or 2 years. Well, sometimes you think, okay, we're just in the end of this of this very fast development. But then new models come and you never know. Things that 2 years ago, 3 years ago were just... we wouldn't imagine that they would be here. They are now in reality. So as you're saying, we don't know. But I hope that if we will benefit from that we will think about how everyone can benefit from that, not only those who maybe develop these models, ideas, AGI, and how we can spread it.
So really democratizing
exactly.
and
I think
including. And then what you're saying is that it's up to us that we need to steer it. Then,
Exactly.
Or we need to drive it in a certain direction. We cannot sit in the back seat, I guess.
Yeah. I think like working at the National Library, democracy is very important to us. So I think it's the key word here, how to democratize it.
Awesome. Lua, do you have any thoughts? Have you changed your mind since the last time, perhaps? Or?
On the topic of AGI or...
Dystopian, where on the spectrum are you?
Well, first of all, I think my view on intelligence and sort of human-like intelligence hasn't really changed regarding the models, but more regarding humans. So my sort of big realization, if you want to call it that, small realization, is that the human brain works in a very similar way as a big model.
It's like for Hinton in some way, I think.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Because I mean, what happens in the artificial neurons is kind of similar to what happens in a biological neuron. You reach some thresholds and then it sends a signal further.
Yes.
So that alone, I mean, I don't think the AGI when we get there, it won't be a transformer. It will be something else. Yes. Something that is trained multi-sensory data, perhaps, or whatever. I don't know. So yes, I think it will happen. But to enslave humans, you don't need that.
Well said. Oh, I like it.
You just need an app where you can rate each other, and you will bring all Stockholm, to its knees, and that has already happened. Instagram and etc. So I'm sorry, we already enslaved and we did it ourselves. So I'm not super afraid of that. I think I'm gonna.
It's a novel kind of insight. I think that's a good way.
Because it has nothing to do with AGI.
No, so I'm gonna lean into.
It has to do with humanity.
Yeah,
and how we steer that.
Exactly. So I'm gonna lean into what Jostina said. We have to democratize it, and then we can survive and probably use it.
Very thoughtful. Thank you so much, Justyna and Love, for coming here, speaking about the amazing progress that we have seen in KBLab. Please do continue the amazing progress, and looking forward to upcoming releases this year, as you promised here. So that will be amazing.
And for me, I said it when we started, and on the same note, you are rock stars, guys.
I think actually,
I think you are fucking rock stars.
Yeah, what you have provided, in terms of providing models and AI to the Swedish society is amazing. So please keep up the good work.
So
Thank you.
Thank you for having
me.
me.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thank you
Taking
for
the
having
time.
us.